Today on Chasing the Sun, we get a little technical and share some of the reasons for rigging the way we do.
That's what I'm talking about. Look at that.
Move around, it's free to swing, and when you go to set the hook or have the fish set itself, it's always going to catch in the corner of their mouth.
Yep, there it is.
It's easy to catch more in the Gulf. You just need to think like a fish.
Start trying to think like that fish. If you can think like a redfish, you'll learn how to catch those fish under any conditions. Yeah, look at that!
Chasing the Sun is brought to you by Holiday Inn Resort, Panama City Beach. Humminbird, simply, clearly better. Dulce Vida Tequila. Smith Optics. And by Pirates Cove Marina. You enjoy the Gulf, we'll take care of the rest.
If y'all have watched this show for very long, y'all know I'm into details. Those details can be from how I set up my boats and keep them clean, the way I rig my live wells. All those little details are what I attribute a lot of my success to.
Oh, come on, don't change it off my colors. You don't like those colors?
Well, the same thing goes for trying to figure out how to catch fish on a specific set of conditions on that day. In fishing, no two scenarios are ever the same. I don't care what fish you found yesterday or what worked yesterday, that was yesterday. I don't care what worked 10 minutes ago.
Right now we got nothing.
Nada.
We gotta put something in our favor here.
It's a constant evolution of conditions is what we're trying to figure out.
When this jig hit the water, I mean, I let him about 20 feet, he turned and ran.
I really want you to focus on how we got to those conclusions, how we got to that solution. And not necessarily what it was, not necessarily where we're at or what we're using, but why are we there? And why are we using that setup? Part of the complication and the intimidation with people when you get into saltwater fishing is how many different types of rigs and how many different types of hooks and knots we use. And it's because we're fishing for a lot of different types of fish, a lot of different species, in every different scenario. All right, so we're gonna start with hooks. This right here, it's a circle hook, right?
Yep.
What kind of hook you got there?
This is a J hook. We use this mostly for trolling.
So the reason that we only have one J hook out here and a whole bunch of circle hooks is because if you're fishing in the Gulf, especially in salt water, you're gonna be fishing a circle hook most of the time. So with the circle hook, what should you do?
If you go slower with a circle hook, what's going to happen is when you pull, it's going to catch that lip and then it grabs and hooks the fish.
Yep.
Yep, there it is.
This is basically a great conservation tool because we do a lot of catch and release fishing, even the reef fishing, right?
Yep.
Now by law, you have to fish this hook, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, in the Gulf of Mexico, we have to fish circle hook when we're reef fishing. So if you're gonna fish it, we're gonna show you a couple knots that are gonna A, make you a stronger connection, and it's gonna increase your hookup ratio. When you think of the history of fishing and tackle since the beginning of time, knots have always been a very important part of that. Because it doesn't matter how good your tackle is or how strong your line is, without good knots, you're not gonna catch fish. The development of knots and knot systems is gonna constantly change as the types of line changes and how we're using them. I mean, let's face it, braided lines are fairly new when you think of the history of fishing. And this is where I want you to really think of how you develop your fishing system. The strongest knot is not always the best knot. In our saltwater environment, we always use some type of leader on the end of our braided line. We don't ever tie our braid straight to the hook. Oh! I want the clear section because these fish see it. But there's a second part of that. braid is not very abrasion resistant either. So that leader is gonna give me some abrasion resistance when that line's pulling across the teeth of the fish or across structure. So there's two reasons right there, abrasion resistance and that clear section, that stealthy approach is why I'm gonna use a piece of fluorocarbon leader between my braided line and the hook. This is, to me, is probably the most common. I call it a nail knot. You'll see it, most of the charter boats use this. People have other names for it, an offshore knot or grouper knot.
It's a quick and simple knot. That's why a lot of the charter boats use it.
Exactly. But the ability to tie one knot in so many different diameters of line is what makes it the most versatile knot for us.
My favorite way is going to be what's called a loop knot, and I use this inshore, offshore, pretty much anytime I want the hook or the jig to have its maximum movement and be able to swing freely. This is the knot I prefer, and I like it because it gives that bait, you know, whatever you got going down there, it gives it the way to move around, it's free to swing, and when you go to set the hook or have the fish set itself, it's always going to catch in the corner of their mouth.
The balance I'm looking for in a reef fishing setup is power and finesse. And what I mean by that is I want the bait we're using, which is typically going to be a live bait, but could be cut bait. Either way, you want that bait to look as natural as possible. With any knot, any rig, you go, you know, what's my priority? Is it strength? Is it, you know, movement of the bait on there? Is it the quickness to tie? Because let's face it, there's some rigs that are awesome and, you know, you got fish up by the boat. I mean, a big cobia just swam up and you don't go, you know what? I want to sit down and tie an FG knot and I want to put a, you know.
Then I'm going to snell it.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, no, I need to get a bait in front of that fish right now. So the speed you can tie this is important as well. Okay, you can keep it super simple. You can drop a piece of cut bait down and you're going to catch fish. But you can take it to the next level. And let's say you're not here during red snapper season, but you want to take some fish home. Well, if you just rely on luck and just fire some cut bait down, you're probably gonna catch some red snappers or triggerfish. But there's a ton of other fish down there. And if you really dive into the details of what those fish are doing, how they're feeding, why are they there, and how you can adjust your rig to target other species, then you will open up a whole new world to reef fishing other than just catching your typical snapper.
When you get it filtered to the bottom out here, it's getting bit by something. I like to think of this as like a little candy bar.
I'm not having fun. You know why?
Because you hadn't killed my hopes of catching the slam yet?
Well, the way we accomplish that is by fishing really light leader, small hooks, but you're reef fishing. So when you hook a fish, there's a reef right there. You can't let the fish go run off because he runs down into the reef.
You're right, man. That makes all the difference in the world.
Ooh, I love it.
What is it?
I don't know, but he's winning some, you're winning some.
Yeah, it's like a tug of war, right?
So you have to have a rig that's got enough strength to it and a hook that's strong enough. So when you do get that bite and you get that hook up, now you can drag that fish right away from that reef as soon as you can, and that way you can catch them.
On that little tiny pilchard.
Yes.
Hold
Isn't
on.
that crazy?
Hey, I'm just gonna let the drag off mine. Let me come help. Oh, don't try to lift him in. That's only a 20-pound test. Oh. There we go.
That's awesome.
On that little tiny pilchard. All right.
Hey.
What?
Little bait, big fish, light line, little bitty teeny bait. Oh. Let's go back down and see if we can get another one of those.
If you saw me and Meredith trying to chase the world record amberjack, this is a perfect situation where we don't have power and finesse. All we have is finesse because she's trying to catch this big amberjack on a reef with really, really light gear. So this is where I have to kind of think outside the box here. I know what tackle we have and we're gonna fish really light leader, and I know what fish we're trying to catch. They're super strong and they live right on a wreck. So how are you gonna work that out?
I'm gonna try to keep you on this side of the boat. I'm just gonna kind of keep spinning the bow to the right a little bit.
Okay. You know, he kept pulling us farther and farther from the wreck, but as we would drift back, it would take more and more line out.
Oh man, there goes my fly line.
Which makes me nervous because at least with my fly line on my reel, I feel like one, I have one less connector knot that can break on me. And two, with 100 feet of line out, I've got a lot more control.
I'm gonna dial it just a little bit back.
I knew if we hooked that fish right on top of the wreck, it's not gonna work. So I started thinking, well, if we can tease that fish out here away from the wreck and then hook them, then you stand a chance to catch that fish.
I would just be real careful.
Yeah, I will.
I know. I got it. Get in the boat, baby.
Yeah, we got
That's
it.
what
We
I'm
got
talking
it.
about.
Yeah, we did. That is totally it. Okay, watch the tippet.
Yeah.
Watch the tippet. Oh, that is it. That is it, my friend. This little fly caught that big fish on 8 pound.
Let me tell you something.
That's one of my secrets. Go small.
That's a world record amberjack.
Yeah, that is a beauty.
That's a world record.
Right here.
It worked.
Woo!
He's in the box.
He's in the box.
I'm not gonna sit here and talk about this guy a lot. That school's still right here. One of the cool things about red fishing is we find them in so many different scenarios. Pretty much any day of the week. I don't care how windy it is. I don't care if it's sunny, raining, cold, hot, doesn't matter. We have redfish around here and you can catch them no matter what the conditions are.
Where do you see them really here in Panama City Beach? I mean, are you seeing them oceanfront, in the back? I know you've mentioned bridges.
Yeah, all those. Obviously, my preferred method is sight fishing, which is why you hear me talk about fishing light leader, clear water, a lot of these really, really natural looking soft plastics. That catches redfish in clear water. I want to rig it on a heavy jig head. I mean, sometimes 3/4 ounce, sometimes even like a 1 ounce jig head, depending on the wind and the current and how I can cast it. I'm just looking for a long, long cast. And I fish it on a jig head because it's just sand bottom. So I like that exposed hook. I'm not worried about catching on grass or anything. It's just white sand bottom. And I want to know when that fish bites it, you have an exposed hook right there. So your hookup ratio is great with a jig head. Now, let's take it onto the grass flats. And the funny thing is, I use the same lure on both sides, but how I rig it is what makes it fish so much differently. I'm gonna rig it on a weedless hook, and I'm gonna fish a lot lighter weight. 2 reasons. One, we can get closer to these fish on these grass flats. We're pulling along super stealthy. And then the second reason is because it's so shallow and it's so calm, the fish are gonna be more spooky. So if you have a 1/2 or 3/4 ounce jig head and it just slams into the water out in front of these fish on a grass flat, they're gonna run from it. So I like to fish like an 1/8 or even a 1/16 ounce heel weight on my hook, and then that way, it's still enough weight where I can cast it to them, but it's gonna land a lot softer and give me that stealthy approach that I need on the grass flats. Well, that doesn't mean you can't catch redfish when it's windy and the water's all churned up. You're just gonna change your approach. When the water gets churned up, I'm not gonna use those stealthy lures that I'm talking about while we're sight fishing. That fish would probably not even know the lure was there. That's when I'm gonna look into, a lot of bass fishing lures are really good redfish lures. I'm gonna start thinking like a bass fisherman here. When I get in that churned up water, I want something like a chatterbait, something that's gonna make some vibration, make some flash, a spoon, and draw that fish's attention. Because in that churned up water, with a lot of chop and stuff like that, that redfish is not near as spooky. So you can be a little more aggressive with that fish. The same thing goes when you move to deeper water. That fish is gonna be a little less spooky. You can fish a heavier jig head and get the lure right to those fish. So really, the more you observe that fish and you learn how they act, that's gonna help lead you to the correct solution to how to catch that fish on that day.
With the Rio redfish,
This day that me and Meredith were gonna try to fly fish a redfish, I knew this was basically the perfect storm of everything you do not want trying to fly fish for redfish. Just catching a redfish didn't matter anymore. But that wasn't our goal. And that's what's fun about fishing. You get to make your own goals. So we set a goal to catch one on the fly. So that's what we're gonna try to do.
I think they're facing inshore, right?
And facing all the jigs are there. All right, we'll go start spinning. You think you can reach that?
Yeah. You think I should throw it in the middle of them?
Yeah, and drop it right in it. I think it's 4 or 5 fish. Oh, that's good. Maybe a hair short, but I think it's pretty good. Sometimes my own worst enemy is my knowledge of what happened yesterday. When me and Meredith were trying to catch a redfish on the fly, I immediately want to go back to where I saw the most fish the day before. I mean, that's just common sense, right? They're there, I want to catch them. Well, the problem is conditions change. As those conditions change, you might have to reevaluate why you're fishing where you are. And most of the time, I have my best learning days when I'm faced with adversity.
Tough morning. At least we saw some backs, couple of tails.
I don't know if that's better or worse, but it's kind of aggravating to see the fish there. You know they're there.
It's kind of like a tease.
Yeah, but when you're sight fishing, you got to be able to see them.
You do.
And it has been windy and cloudy. This is a major cold front in February. And I don't care what you try to do. If you're trying to sight fish for anything, it's tough. If I get to do what I did yesterday, I'm not learning anything from it. But when I try that and I fail at it, it makes me look for a new scenario. It makes me take today's conditions and what's happening right now and try to apply that. And honestly, that was the only way we had any success. Take those days that you feel are tough and you feel like you might be a failure because you're not catching what you wanted to catch. If you learn something from that, that's not a failure.
Chasing the Sun has been brought to you by McCord, Florida Watersports, Grundens, we are fishing, Panama City Inshore, these guys can fish, and by Visit Panama City Beach, real fun beach. If you're looking to book a fishing trip and it's your first time to Panama City Beach, here's a few tips to consider. Offshore or inshore? If you're looking to catch some fresh fish for the grill, you should try one of the many head boats or guided trips that specialize in reef fishing. Red snapper is the most common on the reefs, but many other snapper species, grouper, triggerfish, and amberjack, are plentiful in the Gulf. Be sure to look at the time of year and be aware of the regulations. What species are open and size restrictions. Head boats and guides should tell you, but be sure to ask before booking. Inshore trips are usually half or full day trips that keep you within sight of land. Popular with people who want to focus more on the sport, most are catch, take a quick photo, and release. Inshore is also a good way for newcomers to get their sea legs and find out if you're susceptible to seasickness. If you know you do get woozy on the water, you can still wet a line. Fishing from the pier or beach is a relaxing option that many locals and visitors successfully share. There's a wide variety of quality trips available, but be sure to book early, because the best ones book up fast. Go to ChasingTheSunTV.com and click on Fishing Resources to get all you need to book that first trip.
So if you judge your success by how many fish you catch each day, you're missing the whole point. Fishing is all about creating challenges for yourself and figuring out how to overcome them. Instead of like trying to listen to what the best lure is, or just trying to find one way to do it, start trying to think like that fish. If you can think like a redfish, you'll learn how to catch those fish under any conditions. And it's something that you never get bored of seeing because it changes, and you're always introduced to new things out there. When we're out, we're just trying to go fishing, and along the way we see dolphins. Usually at our inlet there's tons of dolphins, and you'll see them doing different things different times of year because they're chasing these bait migrations and fish migrations. There's so much to learn by just being on the water and being observant of all the things around us. It all plays into this giant puzzle. Fishing out here is an experiment. I mean, and the funny thing is, We feel like it might be a failure if it doesn't work out how we had planned, but look around, look at where we're at, and look at the environment we're getting to conduct this experiment. It's pretty nice. And any day I'm on the water, I'm gonna be learning from it, whether I catch fish or not, or how I catch them. You know, you would think, yeah, well, if you've been there doing it a while, maybe, you know, you kind of got it figured out. Well, I don't, and I'm glad I don't, because it's an experiment, and I still feel like I'm learning. I feel like I'm new to this. I feel like no matter how long I spend out here, there's gonna be things to be learned every day. And luckily for me, I get to do it in one of the most beautiful environments on earth.